Thanks a lot, Chris, for this nice introduction, and especially I want to thank you for inviting me again to this fabulous institute here in Chicago. It's always a big pleasure to be here and to talk to you. As you might hear already now from my first sentences, first words, my voice is a bit, down. I have been suffering from a cold, and the day before yesterday I couldn't talk at all. Yesterday it became a bit better during the flight, and today I hope I'll do it. So please apologize if during this 1 hour my voice might get a bit weaker than now, but I hope it will be fine. Yeah, I'm going to talk to you tonight about our survey activities and excavation activities in northern Iraq, in the Kurdistan region, and it is two projects which I'm going to present to you. One is a survey project indicated by the yellow line in a white area adjoining the Turkish and the Syrian border, located to the east of River Tigris. And the second project, second part of the talk, is our excavations, which we've been carrying out since 3 years at a cluster of sites within this larger region. Just a map to pinpoint where we are. That's not now the intention to say, and you might know from many lectures, that excavators of a certain site always want first to state that their site is in the center of the ancient world. It's at the middle point of all important routes and so on. No, that's not the point I'm wanting to elaborate here. It's just by chance that this red area where we are working is now in the middle of the map. What I want to show is this map. It's really just by accident. So what I want to show by this map is that the location of our area of investigation is a very fascinating one, because we are connected to different regions, and we can study the interactions, cultural interactions over time between these regions. So our site is at the northern point, at the northern fringe of Mesopotamia, as I already said. On the other hand, it is directly connected to northeastern Syria, to the Syrian Jazeera area, and it is connected through the Tigris Valley to Anatolia, southeastern Anatolia. And even there is a connection to the western Iranian areas. So that is why that area is a very good place to study cultural interactions, interconnections. And the second aspect is urbanization. So as we are on the fringe of northern Mesopotamia, we have the chance to study the Bronze Age, early Bronze Age to Middle Bronze Age urbanization processes, as this region was part of this large area of urbanization in northern Mesopotamia. The situation at the crossroads of different regions, or at the meeting point of different regions, is still indicated clearly today. And I can give you an example of a place called Fish-Khabur, which is exactly located at the corner of three modern countries, Syria and Iraq and Turkey, and it's an important ford over the river Tigris, where where crossing over from Iraq to Syria is possible nowadays. It's the only open border post between the two countries of Iraq and Syria at the moment, and it was always an important crossing of the Tigris and enabling an east-west connection. Interestingly, this is also relevant nowadays for our project, because we have members in our team which we've been working with for decades, you can say, in Syria, very highly trained, educated excavators, and they cross over from this point. It takes a lot of permissions from Syrian authorities and from Iraqi Kurdistan authorities to make them go over at that point, but finally it worked out. So you can cross the river Tigris on a boat, and then you can enter from Syria. So that is just showing that until now, this crossing is, especially also for our project, it is an important factor. On the other hand, our project is connected with other projects, survey projects taking place in northern Iraq. Our survey is called the Eastern Khabur Archaeological Survey. You can see it here, Eastern Khabur, because it's the river Khabur as a tributary of the Tigris, and there's another Khabur, the Western Khabur in Syria, which is the tributary of the Euphrates. So we are on the Eastern Khabur. So our survey project is closely connected to an Italian survey, the Land of Nineveh regional project, to a Polish survey, the Upper Greater Sarp Archaeological Reconnaissance, and to a Harvard survey, the Erbil Plain Archaeological Survey. We are closely exchanging results, and we are working on very similar methodologies. So we form a group which is called the Assyrian Landscape Research Group, and we are able to investigate a vast area of land surrounding the metropolitan core area of the Assyrian Empire, which is here at Nineveh, Khorsabad, and Nimrud. So it's the belt around this metropolitan core area of the Syrian Empire. So that is the basis of this collaboration, but of course it also extends to other periods, because we are investigating from the Neolithic onwards the settlement, development, and cultural development up to the Islamic period. The area where all these projects are located is the autonomous region of Kurdistan in Iraq. And that is an area or a region which is very suitable for archaeological research at the moment. In the last decade, or even more than the last 10 years now, it's becoming a focus of archaeological activities due to the high level of security in the region. So we've been able to work there through all the summers from 2013 to last summer. So that's the years when the Islamic State had occupied Mosul. As you see from the map, Mosul is not so far away from Duhok, where we are stationed. But due to the high security in this region, we could work quietly and uninterruptedly during all this period. So that's why Kurdistan is such a favorite place for archaeologists at the moment. You can also see the changing or differing borders which are discussed between the Iraqi central government and the Kurdistan Regional Autonomy Administration, and hopefully there will be some solutions in the future. But now for us as archaeologists, it's also a promising region for research in the years to come. And a lot of archaeological projects, not only those four which I've shown you, but others are located in the provinces of Erbil and Suleymaniye, while we are located in the province of Duhok, which is, as you can see, directly adjoining both Turkey and Syria. Now, normally follows the chapter on geography, but I will make it quite short and show you just 3 slides to replace this chapter. So we have first very strong winters with a lot of snow in the mountains. It's close to the Zagros Mountains, and many times in winters passes and connection roads are cut due to heavy weather conditions. In springtime, the region is extremely fertile. In this region, there is a precipitation of 400 to 500 millimeters per year, which enables rain-fed agriculture on a very stable basis. There's good soils, so it is a highly productive agricultural area, and that is one of the main preconditions for a successful urbanization process, which started in the early Bronze Age, maybe even in the final part of the Chalcolithic area. So this picture is taken in spring times, and it shows the site of Bassetki with the upper city, the mound of Bassetki, and in the foreground, the lower city of Bassetki. So as nowadays, the area used to be a very good area for producing wheat. From exactly the same position, the next photo was taken, which shows how the area and the site looks in summer. It looks like this, so you would hardly recognize that it's just exactly the same view, just some months later, when we work there in summer, it's like working in a desert, and it's hard to imagine that this is such a fertile and productive agricultural region. The survey area has been divided by us into 5 regions on geographical terms. So there is the Tigris Valley here, then the eastern Tigris Plain, area B, then the zone Z is the foothills of the Zagros systems, while with area D we are already in the mountains, in the high Zagros ranges. And finally, there's a 5th area, region E, which we call the corridor of Amedi. There's the city of Amedi here, and this is a corridor going from west to east, and through this valley you can reach Iran, and that is why also this area is connected to the regions of western Iran. So this is part of this interconnectedness of the region. I will shortly guide you now through these 5 regions, showing you how the geography looks like, how the natural landscape is, and also explaining you what kind of sites and developments we can recognize. So the first part is the Tigris Valley. Parts of the Tigris Valley have been flooded through the Eskimos Dam, and a lot of rescue excavations had already taken place in the 1980s, so there's nothing for us now to investigate in this flooded valley, although we just have received news that the level of the lake is extremely low this year, which will enable us to go back into the lake and do archaeological survey now in this area as well. In the northern half of the region, the Tigris Valley is as it used to be, and we have, of course, a lot of sites along the river, but we were surprised to find out that these sites are not the real big sites. They are not located in the Tigris Valley. We have sites of a rather modest size, and we were wondering why that, because the Tigris Valley is a very good region principally, but maybe there are 2 reasons which prevented the development of really large urban agglomerations. One is that the valley bed is rather small, so it's not very wide, and it does not allow for large-scale agriculture. And the second reason is that the valley is very bended and is not suitable as a traffic line, because you would have a really long way to go up, and it makes much more sense to go through the adjoining plains. So that's why the Tigris Valley, opposite of our general assumption that the Tigris is the focus of cultural development, is been kind of a backyard of the urban development. Totally different is the region B, the eastern Tigris plains, and especially the Selivani plain, which is located in the Dohuk region. This is a rather flat, slightly undulating plain with very good soils and with very productive agriculture, and also in connection to agricultural activities, you always find pastoralists who are in connection with the agriculturalists and who have the possibility to bring their flocks to the fields after the harvest. So there's a close symbiosis, even nowadays, between pastoralists and agriculturalists. And this is a region where we can identify a urban development, not in the Tigris River Valley and also not in the foothills of the mountains, as we will see now. So region C then is these foothill regions, or the lower Zagros ranges. Again, this region is fertile, it has good soils, and it has the river Habur, which is a quite big river, bigger than the Syrian, the western Habur. And this region was somehow cut or divided of the developments in the plains, especially also the urban developments, due to the mountains. So we found out that the big Mesopotamian empires did not extend across the mountains into these foothill regions, except for one period, which is the New Assyrian period, where the rock relief of Tiglath-Pileser III at Mila Mergi demonstrates, and here's the relief and the inscription, demonstrates and explains also in written form that the Assyrians conquered this land, which is the land of Uluba, as it is mentioned in the sources. So they conquered this foothill region and included it into the Mesopotamian Empire, the New Assyrian Empire. So this is a special moment, on the first time in the historic circuit that the region was included in the political developments of northern Mesopotamia. The zone D, which are now the high Zagros ranges, is the regions which you can see here in the background, and immediately it becomes evident if you look at these pictures that it's a region which is not really suitable for large-scale settlement systems, and that's exactly what we found. Very few sites, very small sites, but still, until now, we are not able to do a careful survey in this region, because this is where the PKK is installed, and this is where Turkish artillery often comes or Turkish planes coming and bombing the PKK positions. So that's why for us it's kind of a no-go area. We always hope that it will be better some year, and then we can go into the mountains to do a survey there. But until now it's really difficult. And then finally the region E, I already mentioned, it's the corridor of Amedi. And we suppose that it was a connection line from east to west, and also some of the ancient Oriental sources indicate that this was a connection line. To our great surprise, we did not locate prehistoric or Bronze Age sites in this area. All the sites we found date to the Hellenistic and later periods. So for this Hellenistic, Parthian, Sasanian periods and Islamic periods, we can very well demonstrate that it was an important region. But until now, the lack of any earlier sites is puzzling us, and we don't really understand until now why. Is it just that we can't find the sites which are interesting? We should look on hilltops, we should look at places like the modern city of Amedi, which is covering a rock on top, and we suppose that it's been a very old settlement, probably even an Assyrian settlement, the town of Uke, but it is so intensely settled nowadays that we are not able to carry out survey there to find out what is the history of Amedi. Let me just mention some words about methodology. So one of our main methods is using a drone to document all the sites. First, we are looking on satellite images to identify sites, which is not always easy in this region, very different from Mesopotamia, where sites clearly pop out in any satellite image. In this mountainous area, it's much more difficult to detect sites from satellite images. So we have to travel and even walk long distances, and whenever we detect sites, we have the drone and we fly over them and can create 3D models of the sites. We now also have been using a larger drone, which is not only able to document one site, but it can document transects. For example, here, larger areas where we, for example, follow roads, presumed roads, holloways, which exist between sites. And so this enables us to make a much more extensive survey of ancient settlements. I don't want to show now to you a lot of settlement pattern maps, because it would be a bit boring, but I want to point out just some specific developments which we could identify in the survey. And I divided these developments into two groups, into two kinds. First is periods where we can see that the first mountain, the first range of the Zagros Mountains, which is along this white line, this is the Jebel Bihir, so that separates the Tigris and eastern Tigris plains from the foothill and the mountain areas, so that in these periods, this mountain range, this first mountain range really was a border of civilization, you could say. That we have developments in the plains which had no effect on the mountain regions, on the foothill regions. For example, in the prehistoric periods, in the Ubaid period, or in the early phases of the late Chalcolithic, but also in the Mitannian period. We have a lot of Mitannian sites here, but nearly nothing in the foothill area. And this also interestingly extends to the Middle Assyrian period, where we have a large amount of Middle Assyrian sites, also administrative sites, but not a single site beyond the mountains, which is also a clear indication that the extent of the Middle Assyrian administration, of the administrative system of the Middle Assyrian Empire, obviously ended at the foot of the first Zagros ranges. Opposed to this, we have other periods where the regions were connected to each other, where there was a permeability between the plains and the mountains. This is, for example, visible in the early Bronze Age, a period where we have the site of Bassetki as an urban center. But as you can see here, although the plains are much more densely occupied, there is there is occupation also in the foothills. The same is true for the Middle Bronze Age. Middle Bronze is the period with the largest extension of settlement of all periods before the Islamic and Sasanian and Islamic times. So also in this period, the two regions were connected. And also in the Neo-Assyrian Empire, we find the same picture. And this is due to what I already explained before, the occupation of the Uluba region, so that might be this region, by the Assyrians, and the establishment, at least of a number of Assyrian sites. You can always see that the density here is much less than the density in this Selivani plain. So let me now come to the excavations, and you might not be surprised now after what I said about the survey that we picked out sites in the Selivani plain, because it is kind of a focus of cultural development, and we picked out a large urban site, the largest urban site which we detected in the survey and its surroundings. So that's the site of Bassetki itself, and two other sites labeled Muqable 1 and Muqable 3 sites, just at 5 kilometers distance from Bassetki. So these sites are in the middle of the Selivani plain, a bit east of the Tigris River, like 15 kilometers away from the Tigris River, and the same distance, a bit less, maybe 8 kilometers from the first Zagros mountains, so in a perfect position, both for urban development, you have a lot of space, you have a lot of agricultural soil, and also for traffic, because unlike the Tigris River, this area is perfect for having routes and for having traffic. I will just shortly refer to the two excavations at the smaller sites, Muqable 1 and Muqable 3, and we did these excavations first in order to establish an overall chronology of the region, because it's important to have stratified pottery from different regions, which helps us to identify the survey which we, the pottery which we collect during the survey. And also the other reason was to find out the development before the urban phases, so how the predecessors of the urban developments were. First, we have a short look at the site of Muqable 1. This is a site dating to the late Chalcolithic period, so it was only occupied in two periods, in late Chalcolithic 1 and 2, and what we can see is a village kind of site, but a site which shows traces of production. So there's a pottery kiln here, which still was loaded with some broken potteries, and that shows a kind of, I think, autonomous agricultural-based village, and this kind of villages existed all over the plain before the beginning of the urbanization process. Then the other side, Muqable 3, just on the opposite side of the same wadi, shows a long sequence of occupation. It starts when the first site is been abandoned, so sites or occupation is moving from one place to another. In this case, they just moved over the river and founded a new site during the later part of the late Chalcolithic period. But now, interestingly, from this foundation period of this village, there's an uninterrupted development into the third millennium, into the early Bronze Age. This is a transitional phase first, and then the period which we labeled the Ninevite 5 period, so the first half, more or less first half of the third millennium BC. but only, interestingly, only in the very early part of this Ninevite 5 period, the site was occupied and then it was abandoned. And it was abandoned, obviously, when the large urban site of Bassetki was founded. So that means that smaller sites are abandoned in order to bring people into these new urban agglomerations. We don't know about the strategies. Maybe they attracted people by giving housing plots or other things. So certain developments took place which created these larger urban agglomerations, with the consequence that a lot of these smaller village sites around were abandoned. So no occupation there in the second half of the third millennium, which is the major urban phase, but interestingly a reoccupation in the Middle Bronze Age. And that is interesting because, as I told you before, the Middle Bronze Age is the period with the highest density of sites. And in this time there was not only the urban center of Bassetki, but there was a big cluster of small sites. So that was a completely different organization, social organization. The culture or the civilization depended much more on villages in addition to the urban center than compared to the early Bronze Age. So that is a very interesting tendency which we can discover. And the same holds true for the Middle Assyrian period, when now we know that Bassetki was still a center of the area, but although the site is just 5 kilometers away, this place continued to be an settled and a site, probably a dependent site. So we stopped the excavations in Mukable after we found out the sequence, but now one of our Tubingen archaeologists, Ivanopoulos, is going to continue excavating this site, especially the Middle Assyrian and Middle Bronze Age levels, to study how these more kind of sites, how these presumed village sites functioned in the system together with urban centers. Okay, now I'm switching over to Bassetki, which is the main excavation which we have been carrying out since 2015. So we've done 3 seasons of excavations there, and our excavations are carried out together with the Duhok Antiquities Department. It's Dr. Hassan Qasim who is collaborating with me in this excavation, and we formed a group which is called the KUGAMIT, the Kurdish-German Archaeological Mission in Duhok. And so that is one of the, I think, first officially labeled Kurdish-German scientific collaborations which we're carrying out. There's 2 major reasons for having selected Bassetki for a long-term excavation project. First is the large extent of the site, consisting of a lower town and an upper town. And the second reason, to be honest, was the fact that a statue base was found there at Bassetki 40 years ago, or more than 40 years ago, in 1976. And this has an inscription of Naram Sin and is very important from historical point of view. So let me shortly explain these two aspects which created our project. So the first aspect is large extension of the site. The lower and the upper town were surveyed by us, and it was found out that the area together covers a size of 50 hectares, which is a fairly good size for an urban site. It's not in the category of the largest sites, which in the early Bronze Age have up to 100 hectares, but it's in a middle site of an urban center, I would say. The older satellite images even show you that you can see here there's this kind of a white shadow, and this completely meets the extension of the shirt cover now. So this white shadow obviously seems to investigate the ancient lower city. But if you look very carefully to this satellite image of the 1960s, this corona image, you can see a second wall or a second feature, which is a rectangular feature. You can see here a straight line, a corner, and then this line goes down here. Well, it's losing somewhere here, but seems to turn around here or here. So there's also a rectangular lower city. We do not yet understand what the difference is, whether it's a difference in time, but we do not know whether the oval or the rectangular was older, or whether, for example, the rectangular was the city proper, while the oval part was kind of a suburban area surrounding it, so this is still open to further investigations. And what is clear from the survey material that this urban site existed from the early to the Middle Bronze Age, with this in this last extension. So from, let's say, 2600 BC to 1600 BC. So the second aspect which brought us to start excavations at Bassetki, as I mentioned, is the famous statue basis of Naram Sin of Akkad, which was found by chance in a street building activity there. And first, it is important because it's one of the oldest preserved large-scale copper statues of an excellent quality. So if you look at these legs and of how the muscles or the knee or the foot itself is worked, it's in a highly naturalistic, very surprising style. So we wonder how the upper part might have looked like. But the other important and interesting fact is the inscription here, which is an inscription by Naram Sin, the major king of the Akkadian Empire. And I don't know if all of you read German nor Akkadian. So the main message of this inscription is that Naram Sin, the mighty king of Akkad, he fought 9 battles within one and the same year, and of course he was victorious. And then on this, for this reason, the citizens of Akkad, they wished that the emperor was being transferred or was being named a god of the city of Akkad. And they built for him a temple in the middle of Akkad. So that is the first time when we see the deification of an emperor in the ancient Near Eastern states, and that is very important. So the question is now, I mean, this statue basis, we would expect to find it in Akkad, but Akkad is far away. We are at the border, at the fringe of the Akkadian Empire, so why this statue there? There's different ideas. Maybe Akkadians fabricated several of these statues as kind of ideological messages and spread them over the empire at some specific points. So we hope to find more about this idea behind it in case we find the upper part of the statue. But I don't know. Maybe we'll be lucky, maybe not. What is more important now is what are our ideas concerning this statue basis. So it is not the only Akkadian object which was found in the northern periphery of the Akkadian Empire. We also know about the stele of Naram Sin, the same emperor, at Pir Hussein. It is in southeastern Turkey at Diyarbakir, close to Diyarbakir. And we know the Palace of Tel Brak, which was also founded by Naram Sin, by the same emperor. So there is a certain picture of Akkadian objects in the north. And my hypothesis is that these were single centers which were intended by the Akkadians to collect resources from the surrounding regions, and then to bring these resources into Akkad in the south. So like resources like tributes, like agricultural products and other things. And that would make sense because these sites are located in very rich, prosperous areas. There might even be the idea that Bassetki was a kind of a node in such a network of resources, because that brings us back to what I said in the beginning. You have the ford on the Tigris, which gives a good east-west connection, and you have then the way following the Tigris to the upper Tigris region. So that's why Bassetki could have been acting as this kind of node in a network of collecting resources from the newly conquered areas in the north. But as I say, it's a theory, it's a hypothesis, and this is something which we want to prove or disprove, whatever it will come out, during our excavations at Bassetki. This road construction, which brought to light the statue in 74, is still nowadays puzzling us. This is the same road which was built by Saddam Hussein in 1976. And now the government of Kurdistan had the plan to enlarge this. And as you can see, the road turns around the site. It's very, road planners don't like this idea. They like to have straight roads. So there was the idea just to cut through the site and make a 6-lane highway connecting Kurdistan to Turkey. And we interfered in 2014 and convinced the governor of the province of Duhok to change this plan. And they agreed, and we proposed them to lead the new highway around not only the Tell, but also around the lower city of the site, so that the site was completely protected. And we were very happy that this worked out, and that was the initial point for starting our excavations there. We knew that the site will be protected for the future. First step, as normally now in modern excavation, is to do a geomagnetic survey of the site of the lower city. And although not in all parts, we could detect structures. In some parts, we found very interesting and very clear structures. If we zoom in a bit, we can see that there is houses like this one, very regular houses, big houses, smaller houses, a large complex here, which might be kind of a palatial complex, a lot of roads here, maybe a city entrance and kind of a triangular place, plaza, with other roads. So it was a densely occupied city, and this gives us also good prospects for opening up excavation trenches. At the southern end of the site, and you can see here what is the southern boundary of the site, and here it's the occupied area, and here is the outer town area. So outside of the city, there were these linear anomalies, how they are called, straight lines which were very puzzling, and strangely these were just located in the magnetogram at the place where we had told the road construction company that there they should put out the new streets. So we were puzzled and said, okay, we have to investigate what these structures are before they come with their bulldozers. And they came very quickly. And we very quickly started to, in between these bulldozers, to put out trenches. And what we discovered was interesting, because these irregularities proved to be a paved road, paved with potsherds and stones. The road was about 6 meters wide, and we could follow it over more than 100 meters, not only excavations, but follow it in the area by several trenches. So that seemed to be kind of a road, but it is a road outside of the city. And it's a road not leading into the city, but going along the city. So that means it must have been an inter-regional road, a big road maybe, and we can date it to the Middle Bronze Age. And that is very interesting, because we know that in the Middle Bronze Age there was intensive trade and traffic between Mesopotamia and Anatolia, from Assur to central Anatolia, to places like Kültepe-Kanish, where the Assyrians had even founded trading outposts, the so-called Karu. So maybe this road is part of this old Assyrian road network, and that's why we are very happy to have done this investigation. Along the road we found urns, jars, which contained burnt bones, so cremations. And this is also interesting, because we are here in the Middle Bronze Age, and from Mesopotamia, we do not know cremations in this period. We know inhumations. The cremations which are known in the Middle Bronze are from Anatolia, so they are quite frequent in Anatolia. So maybe we have here another hint of a connection to Anatolia, or at least of a traveling of customs, of burial customs along these roads. So it's kind of a very strange thing that exactly where we found this old road, now the new road is going to be, and this is a road again connecting Kurdistan region or northern Iraq with Turkey. So it's maybe it's not by chance that it's a good line for a road. So Finally, we ended up in making 35 different trenches, and we see that this is this road here. We find a cemetery, also cist tombs, which have inhumation burials, so both traditions existed. And we find another street which branches off from this external road and leads into the city. So here, this opening is a gap in the circuit of the city, so maybe it's a city gate. And maybe this is an access to the city. So we got a good idea of a suburban area. This is something where normally archaeologists do not work, because we like to work inside the cities. But due to this chance, we had the chance to work outside of a city, and it proves that it's very interesting to lay out trenches outside of a city. You find things which you do normally not find in excavations. So, except of this area here outside, we opened two other trenches. One in area A, which is the southern slope of the site, and we did a step trench here, which shows us the whole sequence of the site. And then finally, in area C, we opened another excavation because there were several periods which were missing in our trench A excavations. For example, the Middle Assyrian and the New Assyrian periods were missing, although we had survey surface material, and we said that cannot be. So we opened another trench here, and that's where we find the Middle New Assyrian occupation. So that shows you, don't trust one single step trench. It can, for whatever reason, you can just miss important periods. So in combination of these two trenches, we arrive at an overall stratigraphy and chronology of the site. The site was settled in the late Ninevite 5 periods. And now you remember back to what I showed from vocabulary 3. It ended in the early Ninevite 5 period. So that site completely took over, not only from that small site, but maybe from another, from a number of other similar sites. And then we have an uninterrupted urban development from the early Bronze Age to the Middle Bronze Age. Here we miss then the sequence in area A, and you can see just by chance all the missing levels we found in area C. So the Middle Assyrian period and the Neo Assyrian period, and then the site continued through the Hellenistic period into several Islamic times. I will now start from the earlier period and show you the most important finds from these periods, from the early, from the middle, and from the late Bronze Age, that is the Middle Assyrian period. So let's start with the earliest levels on area A. This is the late Ninevite 5 period. So what we have here is a good bunch of materials from this quite badly documented period in northern Mesopotamia. Until now, we have a lot of interesting pottery material, and we have 3 superimposed wide walls, which we interpret as city walls, first city walls. And they extend at the foot of the site, and they show that obviously from this early period onwards, the site was fortified in a way. It was not huge walls, they're just 2.5 meters wide, but still they could function as kind of a city wall. So the pottery, I don't want to now go into the details of pottery studies, just to point out that the Ninevite 5 period now can be very well documented on the base of the pottery which we find from these levels. In addition to the pottery, we have seal impressions from the Ninevite 5 period, and we have a couple of radiocarbon dates, so we can clearly attribute this phase to the time between 2800 and 2650, so a time frame of about 150 years. The next period is a period which you know as the early Dynastic 3 period, for example in Mesopotamia, or as the early Jazira 3 period in Syria. We label it here the early Middle Tigris because it's the middle part of the Tigris River, the Middle Tigris Valley, the early Middle Tigris 3 period, just to show that it's contemporary to these urban developments in other areas. And again, we have a lot of well-stratified ceramic materials, room inventories, houses, which give an indication or a view into household life of this urban site in the mid of the 3rd millennium BC. Then going to the Middle Bronze Age, or you can also know this period as the Old Babylonian period, or some label it the Old Assyrian period, however you call this period, which is dated about between 2000 and 1500 or 1600, 1550, whatever. We did not yet make a large exposure for this period, but what we can see in our step trench is that there used to be very wide walls with heavy stone foundations, indicating quite large architecture. Of course, we do not yet know what kind of function this architecture on the tell has, but this was a period when the site was very much expanding, obviously. And this is also the same period to which we can attribute these buildings, which I already showed to you in the geomagnetic survey. So there's a big house here, and this is interesting because it's a courtyard house here. You have the courtyard, and the courtyard is surrounded by very rectangular rooms. It's a very big house, more than 500 square meters big. And next to it, there's another house, which is a smaller one, but also here you can see it's a rectangular court in the middle and surrounded by one row of rooms. So if you look at this house plan from Newport, it is strikingly similar. And these are the so-called square houses of Newport. And what we have here is also an ideally square house. So there seems to be a common household tradition between southern Babylonia and northern Mesopotamia. And it may be accidental, but this house here is with 200 square meters, nearly double the size of this normal Newport house. So that means there were wealthy households in this lower city. So do these wealthy households have some connection to what we assume for this period, that the site was an important node on the trade routes from Assyria to Anatolia? That might at least be a good reason why having big houses here. So if this is already a big house, we called it the small house, kleines Haus. So this house with 500 square meters, we wonder who might have lived in this big house. And then we have a public building here, which maybe it will be a palace, we don't know, or whatever kind of an official building. We'll know more when we activate this. And just to remind you, this same period is also the time to which the street dates which we had excavated, and in the tombs there was also rich material like a bronze needle or a golden earring or a cylinder seal from a very fine stone. So again, even the suburban area shows us a high level of prosperity in the city. Now we come to the Mitanni period, quite badly known until now in the area. What happened during the Mitanni period? So what is the archaeological character of this period? What we have here is a large house. We only find the courtyard, and it is a courtyard paved with stones, a quite a large courtyard, and the surrounding wall. So again, a courtyard house. On the floor, on this stone floor of the house, we found two cuneiform tablets dating to the Mitanni period. One of them, the left one, was clearly readable, and it talks about 4 trading journeys of a private person. So that means this house was a household of a trading family, and he made an account, a balance about these 4 last trading journeys which he undertook. So obviously, during the Mitanni time, the presence of households which were engaged in trade was still continuing in the Mitanni period. And just a nice object, very familiar for this period, for the Mitanni period, are these priests holding figurines. People used to identify it often as Ishtar representations, but nowadays we think it's not a goddess, it's some kind of a private ritual understanding, and that was found in one of these houses. So this is not connected to big religion, but to household ritual ideas, I would guess. The next period proves now to be our main and most interesting period excavated until now at Bassetki. It's the Middle Assyrian period. What we found there is a big, not a big building, but we think it might be a big building because it is one room which has big walls and it might extend to different sides. There was a broken room inventory Within this building, there were a lot of storage jars, indicating that storage was one of the activities in these rooms. And then between these broken storage jars lying on the floor or in between, we found cuneiform tablets, 26 cuneiform tablets, all Middle Assyrian in date, which prove that, as they are all economic in nature, that this was kind of an economic and administrative, that this building must have been part of an administrative building or complex. So one of these tablets, for example, lies here, just below one of the broken storage jars. In addition, we have a bin made of clay, and we think, this is the same installation, we think it's a recycling bin for cuneiform tablets, and we also found one tablet inside, one cuneiform tablet just outside, so that's where tablets have been thrown into water to preserve them, for remodeling them and make new tablets. And this was often done in schools, in writing schools, so that might be an indication that also not only storing knowledge but also producing knowledge might have been one of the activities. The bin has not been excavated yet, so that's how we left it. We just took out these two tablets. So in this coming summer season, which will start in August, we try to clear out the bin, and we hopefully find then more tablets and get a clearer picture of what this bin must have or once looked like. In the same room, we found a casting mold for an axe. This is clearly, you can see the shaft hole axe, typical of the second millennium BC, and it was blackened by smooth. So that means also a blacksmith shop, workshop must have been there, associated to this building, not in the same room, but it seems to be a multifunctional administrative building. And also these beads, and we did not find only these, but like 200 of beads, they probably hint at a glass production, which would also be something which is a normal activity of an administrative center. Then the storage jars are already mentioned, a lid of a storage jar, and also a frit bowl, or it's better called sintered quartz, but people normally refer to it as frit. So I will show you this picture here. It is a very big, quite a large sintered quartz bowl, typical for the Middle Assyrian period. We find them in Assur and in other Middle Assyrian sites. Maybe also this sintered quartz was produced in this area. And then something very strange was observed. I already told you that we found broken pottery, which indicates that the room was destroyed and the things were broken and smashed and lying on the floor. But then somebody came shortly after, brought mud and made a mud mound around 3 pots. And these were the only 3 pots which were intact after the destruction. So the other sherds were still lying around in the room, and you can see that the mud was also covering these broken sherds. And these 3 complete jars were wrapped in mud. So for what reason, we don't know. Definitely to preserve this situation, to preserve what was inside these jars. So we were very keen to see what was in these 3 jars, and one proved to have been rubbed out in New Assyrian times, strange enough. The second contained pure soil, very clear soil, so there must have been an organic product which was dissolved and which we were not able to distinguish. And then the 3rd jar was the only one which contained its inventory, its content, and these were cuneiform tablets. So there were altogether 65 cuneiform tablets in this one jar, closely and densely packed, as you can see here. So this is the lower part here, then this is the middle part, and this is the upper part, and it was difficult to excavate all these tablets from this content. So again, these are tablets which date to the Middle Assyrian period, and it's clear from the Limu mentionings, from the year names, that it dates to the time of the Assyrian Emperor Salmanassar I and Tukulti-Ninurta I. So we are here in the second half of the 13th century BC. And what is even more interesting is the fact that most of the tablets can be attributed to one single person. And this person is called Ashur-Nasir. And this man was not known before, but it's clear that it's an archive, and it's an archive jar. So that might give us a reason why covering it with this mud pile, maybe to preserve this archive, to keep it on the place. I mean, they could have also taken the jar wherever they went, but they did not want to take it. They wanted to leave it, cover it with this mud mound, probably because they thought they might come back or whatever. I mean, whoever has an idea why this can be done. I mean, there are many possibilities, and we will never find out exactly why. So this person, Ashur-Nasir, was a governor for the Middle Assyrian Empire, and he was the governor of Mardama. So Mardama is both a city and a province, and thus suddenly brought us the ancient name of Bassetki, it's ancient Mardama. What is interesting about it is the fact that Mardama was until now not known to have been a Middle Assyrian province. It was not on our list of provinces, so it's a newly discovered province, which was a northern province, obviously, to protect or to secure the northern fringe of the empire, just at the border of the Zagros foothills. That brings us back to this idea of the border, and maybe also to enable traffic to the upper Tigris area, which was under Assyrian control, the area near Diyarbakir. We have Middle Assyrian settlements. So maybe both this protection and the traffic connection would have been the reason for establishing this province of Mardama. So interestingly, although Mardama was not known for the Middle Assyrian period until now, it is known to have existed in earlier times. We know that Mardaman, just with an N at the end, Mardaman, was a Hurrian kingdom in the Old Babylonian period. It's mentioned in the Mari text, for example. Hurrian kingdom because there was a ruler, a king of Mardaman with a Hurrian name. And Mardaman even appears earlier than that. It appears in texts from the Ur III period as an important city in the north, and it occurs in the time of Naram-Sin. So one of the names of the reign of Naram-Sin was called the year when Naram-Sin conquered Mardaman. So that was something important. Otherwise, it would not have been suitable for giving it, for making it a year name. So now that brings us back to Naram-Sin. So there might be a connection, there might be an importance of the site in connection with the Akkadian Empire. So maybe Naram-Sin conquered Mardaman, and then he transferred it in kind of this, what I labeled resource collection center or something like this. So a lot of new ideas now arriving from this decipherment of the tablets, and that is just like two weeks ago when our philologist, Dr. Bettina Feist from Heidelberg University found out about the name. So now I have to rush to just show you some final slides. I don't want to miss the Neo-Assyrian period. Interestingly, the site continued to exist in the Neo-Assyrian period. We don't know under which name, definitely not Mardaman, because we have no indication of a city called Mardaman in the Neo-Assyrian period, so it might have changed name. But what we find is that this site was a production place again. We find a large pottery kiln, which you can see here, with this typical Neo-Assyrian pottery even inside. And when intensively excavating the kiln, we found interesting hints, evidence for the superstructure of the oven, because it's always so difficult to reconstruct pottery kilns. First, you have very few of them in your excavation, and then they are much collapsed, and it's difficult to understand. So what we find is these long mud brick, it's like pillars, but not vertical, they are horizontal, so it's like joists made of mud brick. And this leads us to an interesting reconstruction of the kiln. It was a two-chamber kiln with a lower combustion chamber and upper firing chamber, and you need a ceiling, a roof, or not a roof, ceiling, a floor between the two chambers. And normally we assume that they were these perforated grates, so a grate with holes inside, but this is a different system. This is the grate which consists of three stripes, so 3 joists, and then the hot air could go up in the gaps between these joists. So this is the side view of these joists. So this is an updraft kiln, a 2-chamber updraft kiln, and it's the first time that we can reconstruct such a principle for the Neo-Assyrian or older periods, because these, we can label it strip grates. These are known starting from the Hellenistic period. So this is the only example until now which we know from pre-Hellenistic periods. And then the last thing, really very last thing I want to show is that the site even continued to be important, or well, not important, but to be occupied in the Abbasid period. We find a nice hoard of silver jewelry. There's an Abbasid jar here, and it was filled with silver jewelry and also with 3 coins. One of them back and front side you can see here. And the coins clearly dated. It dates to the time of the Caliph Al-Mansur. Al-Mansur, the famous founder of Baghdad, the first big emperor of the Abbasid Empire. So here it doesn't seem to be a period of power, because when people hide their jewelry in jars below the floors, it seems to be a period of crisis. So due to the coins, we can date the deposition of the hoard, let's say around 780 AD, and that was the time when the Abbasid Empire expanded towards the north. And the Abbasid Empire in 782 attacked the Byzantine Empire and could really also pull back the Byzantine Empire. Maybe it was in these years of war and of troubled periods when this hoard was hidden. And again, that might be a slight indication. I mean, that is a site in between Mesopotamia and Anatolia, and was always depending on the events which functioned between these 2 big areas. So for our next seasons now, we have a quite good perspective, we have a quite clear perspective what we want to do, what we want to find out. We know that Mardaman existed in the early Bronze Age, in the Akkadian period, so we want to find out more about what was Bassetki in the early Bronze Age and what this statue base was doing there. Then, of course, Mardaman as a Hurrian kingdom is interesting, so maybe the big architecture of the stone foundations, which you saw on the slide, are indication of official buildings on the tell side. And then finally, the Middle Assyrian period, where we have just one room of what obviously is the governor's residence. The governor's administrative building of the Middle Assyrian needs to be excavated on a large scale. So we have a lot of things to do at Bassetki. We are still at the beginning, and I want to thank you. And I also want to thank, of course, my team. It's always one person who explains the results, but of course it's not my results. It's the results of a big team. We are about 40 people. Everyone has his big task. Everyone is unreplaceable in the team, and it's only possible if the team really functions, if it works well together. So that's the main thanks is to the team, and of course also the thanks is for your patience. Now I'm 12 minutes too late. I'm sorry. So thanks a lot.